Hello youth, welcome to term 4 of online Sunday youth videos. What a year it has been. Thanks to those of you who've stuck with us, continued to tune in every week. For those of you who are new, my name is David. For those of you who are old, my name is still David. This term we are going to start by looking at identity. Those of you who attended youth on Friday night 2 nights ago will know that we looked at our identity then and how Christian identity is something that you receive. Well, for the next few weeks we are starting a series by Sid Coop, who's going to be looking at identity as well. Now we want these videos to sort of be like a companion to Friday nights. If you can't get along to Friday nights, that's totally fine. Still check out these videos because all of the content in the videos will still be totally relevant and stand alone. But if you can also make it to Friday nights, that's awesome. If you are not aware of what happens Friday nights, we normally do like a Zoom thing from about 6:30 till 8:30. We play some games, we hang out, and we do a study. It's a great way to stay in community and fellowship with one another and have a fun time on a Friday night and get to know more about who we are and what our identity is in Jesus. If you would like to know more, please send me an email at youth@crossculture.net.au and we can add you to the mailing list and you will hear everything there is to hear about youth on Friday nights. With that, we will kick off this video. Now in this video, we've got some questions that come up. I'd love for you to pause the video and just answer those questions with whoever you're watching it with. If you're watching it by yourself, just think about some answers as well. It's really good for you to reflect on the questions asked so that you can engage more thoroughly with the material. And with that, let's pass it over to Sid Coop and I'll be back up real soon.
I'm not gonna lie, I generally loved being a teenager. I loved hanging out with my friends, playing sports, and going to camp. I had a great relationship with my dad, and my family was pretty solid. I had it good. But like everyone else, there were things about being a teenager that were confusing, overwhelming, and at times just plain scary. Things like asking out my first girlfriend at junior high camp. That's pressure. As a 13-year-old, I had all sorts of questions going through my mind as I faced the crisis of the ask. Questions like, what if she said no? How would my friends respond? How would her friends respond? If she said no, what would I do for the camp banquet? All alone, by myself, while the rest of my friends sat awkwardly with their banquet dates, basically all alone by themselves. And if she said no, would anyone ever say yes? Maybe her no would be the beginning of a lifetime of no's. Maybe I would always be alone. And then there were the questions of what if she said yes? I mean, that could be worse. Then I'd actually have to talk to her and probably sit beside her at the campfire. And what about the end of camp? When her parents were coming to pick her up, would I have to talk to them? The pressure was overwhelming. You know, part of adolescence is working through the pressures and fears of relationships. But perhaps the greatest relational pressure we experience is our relationship with ourselves. No one gets to escape the process of wrestling through questions such as, what is my purpose? Where do I belong? What will make me acceptable? And at times, this process can be completely overwhelming. Our culture attempts to release some of the pressure around identity by telling us we can be whoever we want to be. But to be honest, the pressure to create our identity, the pressure to be whoever we want to be, can be the most crushing part of the whole journey. How do I know who I want to be? How do I figure that out? What if I decide on an identity and quickly discover I don't like it? What if I decide to pursue an identity but fail to achieve it? I mean, the truth is, with hard work and resources, I can achieve a lot, but I can't actually do or be whoever I want to be. I'm 46, 5'10", and about 175 pounds. I'm not very fast, never was, and certainly am not now, and I'm not getting stronger. Now, I love NFL football a lot, but no matter how much I want to be an NFL offensive lineman, and no matter how hard I work at it, I will never be an offensive lineman in the NFL. That is not going to happen. That will never be my identity. The pressure to be whoever we want to be leaves people in our culture anxious, fragile, and in many ways paralyzed. For many of us, the fear of failure, of not being able to create our identity, can be completely overwhelming. I travel a lot for work, so when I am home, I try to attend as many of my boys' activities as possible, including the boring ones, like my son's basketball practices. I remember one evening I took Cole to his practice and took my seat on the sideline near the other hyper-involved parents that were also at the gym. To be honest, I was feeling pretty good about myself and my willingness to sacrifice my time to watch my son not only play basketball, but simply practice basketball. About 10 minutes into the practice, I suddenly heard my son dribble his ball up to me and looked up to see him standing there. And then I heard him say, "Dad, you're the only person in the gym on your cell phone." He then took his ball and slowly dribbled away. You know, it's one thing to be present in someone's environment. It's another thing to be actively engaged. Many of us believe that God may exist and that he may have some awareness of things going on in our world, but the scriptures tell us that not only is he present in our environment, he is actively engaged. In fact, not only is he actively engaged in what is taking place in our lives now, but he was actively engaged in designing our lives before a single breath of life came to be. In the Bible, we have a book called the Book of Psalms. It is a collection of poems or songs that we call Hebrew poetry and wisdom. Most of them are written by a man who was a king of Israel named David, also known as a man after God's own heart. Throughout the book, David writes these really honest poems about his struggles and victories in life and how he continues to fight to journey with God. It's a window into what an intimate relationship with God can actually look like. In Psalm 139, David writes a psalm that expresses just how intimately God knows us and how that makes David feel in response. There are few places in Scripture that so clearly express the power and intimacy of God's knowledge of us as human beings. The reality that he is not just present, but that he is actively engaged in our lives, even to the point of creating our lives. In verses 13 to 18, David says this, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you." In verse 13, David says, "For you created my inmost being." When David is speaking about his inmost being, he's talking about his personality, his inner self, his loves and interests. This is the very core of who we are, the foundation of what makes each of us truly unique. It explains why two people can be born into the same family, but see life completely different. One person might be artistic and emotional, while the other might be more logical and task-oriented. Both are humans, both from the same family, both very different. It is because God has been actively involved in creating the inmost being of each of them. But verse 13 doesn't just speak of creating the soul of a person, it also speaks of God's hand in our physical creation as well. He goes on and says, "You knit me together in my mother's womb." Did you hear that? We have a God who has literally been at work putting together our physical selves inside our mothers before we were even born. When you think of it, this process is mind-blowing. And that is what David says. In verse 14, he says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." David is stunned at the work God has done in creating who he is. The intimacy of God's active engagement in the creation of David's life is overwhelming to him. My son's graduation from high school left him trying to figure out what he would do the following year. This was not an easy decision-making process. He was seeking to determine what the future would hold for him and how he should best prepare himself for that future. Of course, the problem was he didn't know his future. Knowing our future is a problem for all of us, but it is not a problem for God. In verse 16, David says of God, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." What this means is that God perfectly knows our future, and so he perfectly knows how to create and prepare us for that future. He has made us with purpose. We are not a random collection of cells that have simply come together by accident over a long period of time. We are human beings that have been created with intent. God has been intimately engaged in the creation of who we are. We have been given an identity. Did you hear that? We have been given an identity. And here is what that means. We don't need to create our identity. We need to discover it. We already have it. Each one of us has been given a personality. We have been given talents and gifts and abilities. We have value and we have been given a purpose. We have been called to a time such as this. We don't have to live under the pressure of being whatever we want to be. We simply need to embrace the journey of discovering who God has made us to be. And then we need to steward who we are. We need to figure out how to discover and develop our skills and abilities and how to use them wherever we are in ways that show we love God and radically love others. And we do this trusting that God has placed us exactly where we are for a purpose. Our lives are not just random. God does have a purpose for us right now. He has specifically created us for the moments we find ourselves in. And when we begin to realize this is who we are, it changes us. Slowly over time, we become resilient people. We are no longer manipulated by what other people say about us. We only care what God says about us. In fact, in our best moments, we are no longer even controlled by our own feelings about ourselves. Instead, we fight to let the reality of what God says about us shape our feelings. Did you hear that? Our feelings no longer control us. We have been created by a God who loves us, has knit us together in our mother's womb, given us personality, skills, and abilities, and prepared us for the days He has placed before us. When we understand these things, our perception of ourselves no longer defines us. God does. And this radically changes how we feel about ourselves and others. You know, there is no one in my life that has the ability to change how I feel about myself more than my wife, Jen. If I finish speaking and people tell me I spoke really well, I'll believe them. But if Jen tells me I didn't speak very well, I feel depressed. The opposite is true as well. If people let me know I did not communicate well, but Jen tells me I did, I'm moved to joy. So why is this? Well, it's because what Jen thinks of me matters. In certain ways, she defines me. Now, Jen certainly plays a role in shaping how I feel about myself. However, it is nothing compared to the role God should play in shaping how I feel about myself. God has given me an identity and a purpose. When I really understand who He is and the role He has in creating who I am, this is infinitely greater than anything I could experience from anyone else, even my wife. God shapes how I understand and think about myself. You know, when David really came to grips with the role God played in his creation, he responded with great joy and great commitment. Listen to what he says in verses 17 to 18. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Sports has always been a significant part of my life. Even now, I love to play sports and I love to watch my sons play sports. When I was in high school and college, sports became more than just an activity. They became an identity. I felt this huge pressure to be known as an athlete. I had to make the team. I needed to perform, which is why I faced a crisis in college while playing hockey when one of my own players tripped me and tore my knee up. Hockey was done, and since I had made sports my identity, In a sense, so was I. But God had other plans. Looking back, I realize now that God was using this moment to help me understand a lesson that I still need to be reminded of today. My identity is not based on my accomplishments or the positions I achieve. It's not based on the friends I can gather online or the likes I get for the selfie I posted. In fact, my identity has very little to do with me. It has everything to do with Him. He defines me. I don't need to create my identity. I simply need to discover it. What God says about you matters more than what anyone else, including yourself, could say about you. He is your creator, and He is intimately invested in your life. Rest in the reality that God has given you your identity, even when it is hard to see. Trust that He has created you with purpose for this time, right here, right now. This is where you can find resilience, strength, courage, joy, and stability, even when it feels your world is in chaos, even in the midst of great pressure. My friends, here is the truth. You don't have to create your identity. You simply need to discover it.
Welcome back. I hope you got something out of that. Now we've got 2 more videos like that, but next week is our sort of church camp, that's not church camp, weekend. So we won't actually be doing our regular youth activities then. Friday night, there's a fly there. Friday night we'll still be running before the youth talk that's happening as part of the camp thing, and there won't be a Sunday morning video. But there will be a Sunday morning video the following week. So if you enjoyed this one, tell all your friends to check it out because you've got an extra week to do so. Awesome. I'll pray and wrap up. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you that even though this year has been trying and difficult and frustrating at times, and it's gone on longer like this than we would have liked, Lord, thank you that you are still in control, and that you are sovereign, and that you love us, and that you love each of us individually, and you made us, and you knit us together, Lord, and our identity can be found in you, in that identity that you give us. Lord, help each of us to reflect on that this week, and reflect on how much you love us, and how much you care for us, and even in these dark times, you are still there, and you are still God, and you are still King. Help us all this week to focus on you, give our burdens over to you, and rely on you for our every need. Pray these things in your name. Amen. All right, youth, thanks for checking it out. See you again real soon. Please come along Friday nights. Send me an email at youth@crossculture.net.au if you want to know anything. Would love to hear from you. Would really love to hear how you're finding these videos. Feedback would be lovely. Even if you say you hate them, just tell me, so I can know. That'd be sick. All right.